The IBRI, as it's called, the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute, which you're going to hear all about from this, the world's largest panel. So large that we didn't even have room for a podium. Thus, I'm standing with our moderator. Yep. So for those of you who were in the room last year at this very event, you heard John Licklider create and pose a big idea. And that big idea was to some way bring together our industry partners, our research partners, our university partners, and our state partners to come up with a new model for life sciences innovation to be fostered and come to fruition in this state. So I'm pleased to say that in just under a year, thanks to all the partners at this table, from all the different companies, from our research universities, our external partners from Battelle and others who helped us along the way, to IU Health, we've all come to the table and done some pretty creative stuff and some pretty impressive stuff to bring forward the IBRI and fund that IBRI to a great degree already in just that period of time. Not only did you hear Dr. Licklider raise that potential, but then candidate Mike Pence coincidentally raised the same concept as he was moving forward to becoming the next governor of Indiana. And so the state government partners that came to the table in such a big way, including the governor's office, the governor himself, Ryan Streeter, his senior policy advisor, and our legislature, led very capably by Speaker Bosma and so many others, really came to the table as well. So in my 25 years with Cook of being involved in lots of different life sciences projects, I can say without hesitation that this is by far the biggest idea that's come forward, and not only a big idea, but one that everybody has come to the table to embrace in a very, very strong way. And that sends a lot of really tremendous signals, I think, from my perspective, and I hope from others. So the big goal here, obviously, in this is to understand and help capture a portion of the $6 billion that's spent by our life sciences industries, the Indiana-based life sciences industries. We spend $6 billion a year on R&D. Why not capture a bigger portion, a big portion of that $6 billion? What would that translate to? If we only captured 5% more of that in Indiana, you're talking an increase in spend in Indiana of $250 to $300 million of research done in this state. And there's absolutely no reason that can't and won't take place. And you think about the overall impact of those dollars, the trickle down not only to the research institutions, the companies themselves, but the secondary suppliers, et cetera, that comes with that. It's pretty exciting and pretty impressive. We're about to make history here, and not only because we have the world's largest panel on the stage, but because of the topic we're going to talk about and what we're going to advance in this state. Never a better moderator than the gentleman to my left, Gerry Dick, the host of Inside Indiana Business and co-founder of Grow Indiana Ventures, to really help tease out and pull out all the information that's so relevant to this topic. So I'll let Gerry take over, introduce our illustrious panel, and we'll go forward.
All right,
Thanks,
Dan,
Gerry.
thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure. It's really an honor for me to be here this morning. And as I tweeted a little bit ago, and I would encourage all of you to tweet any questions you have of our panel, because I can see it on the screen right down here and direct some questions. But as I tweeted a while back, I think the level of the players who are here today on this panel, on other panels, the attendees at this conference, I think underscores Indiana's position in the life sciences sector as a really a major player, and really underscores too the work that BioCrossroads, among others, has done in this state to truly invigorate and energize a very important sector for the economy. No other, as Dan indicated, sector of or idea, I think, than this Biosciences Research Institute that has been bigger, or maybe will be bigger for a long time. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Really looking forward to it, but I was thinking last night, how in the heck am I going to do this panel with all these people and keep it going, but I'm going to do my best. And the first thing I'm going to do is make very brief introductions, beginning with David Johnson, the president and CEO of BioCrossroads and the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. Brian Bosma is here as well, the Speaker of the House, the Indiana State House of Representatives. Darren Carroll is Vice President of Corporate Development at Eli Lilly and Company. Dan Evans is President and CEO of Indiana University Health. We also have Marietta Harrison, Associate Vice President for Research at Purdue University. Walt Plosila is Senior Advisor at Battelle. We also have Bill Stephan, who is Vice President for Engagement at Indiana University. Ryan Streeter is Senior Economic Policy Advisor and Deputy Policy Director for Indiana Governor Mike Pence. Adam Thies is Director of the Department of Metropolitan Development in the city of Indianapolis. And last but certainly not least, we have Ry Wagner, who is Global New Ventures and Technology Leader at Dow AgroSciences. So a great panel, diverse panel. We've got lots of fields and areas and sectors represented. So we'll get right to the discussion and begin with you, David, because as Dan mentioned, it was a year ago, or about a year ago, that John Lechleiter, threw out this idea of this statewide research institute, and I remember back at the office seeing that and thinking, boy, that sounds pretty cool, but is this just kind of a pie-in-the-sky kind of idea? Does it really have some legs? And here we are just a year later, and we see that absolutely it has legs. How did BioCrossroads, as the facilitator, really bring all these different organizations and entities together to make things happen and get things to where we are in just 1 year?
Thank you, Gerry. This is a big idea. This is a big panel. I'm used to being a little closer to you when you ask me a question on something like this. And there are many people who get a lot of credit for it and for what's happening. Let me just make 3 observations to answer your question. First of all, BioCrossroads is a facilitator. We're a catalyst. We bring people together, good people together around good ideas, and if they're really good ideas, they take off. We've done other big things before, the Indiana Health Information Exchange, OrthoWorks, so to some extent, our collaboration was ready for a new, even bigger idea, and that was part of what John Lechleiter was talking about last year. And I think this panel ably demonstrates the fact that we have a highly collaborative community here, so people will come together around something that really, really matters. And this idea, for the reasons you're talking about and Dan has introduced the topic on, clearly is an idea whose time has come. But it also takes leadership. And what John did at the conference we had last year was to go through and really state the case for why Indiana was a great life sciences community today, in the top 5 of all the states in the U.S. in terms of the number of companies and number of people we have working here. But why essentially we were going to be stuck on a plateau, even a great one, unless we did something further and something better that brought all of our players more closely together across the universities, across industry to make something happen. And so leadership played a huge role. It started with corporate leadership, and the Institute is being industry-led, and that's an important differentiation for it. But we also have had just incredible public sector leadership. Dan mentioned Governor Pence's role and Ryan Streeter's role in advancing this idea, and certainly they captured this from the very beginning of his campaign and signaled clearly when he came into office that's what they wanted to do. But I'm sitting next to a guy here who also signaled very early on that this was a major priority for Indiana government and for the House of Representatives and Brian's colleague David Long in the state Senate, who early gave us the audience that we needed, liked the idea, and helped us advance it. So Senator Kenley, Dr. Tim Brown, we've never worked on anything that has the kind of support and leadership and velocity that this does. And I think you've got to give a lot of credit to the leaders, our public sector leaders as well, who have done that.
We'll talk about that public sector support in just a moment, but first I think there are a lot of people, even people in the life sciences, who are kind of trying to get their arms around what this institute is all about, what it's going to do, what the impact is going to be. From the private sector side, this is a private sector-led initiative. So Darren, Carroll, as you look at what's in it for Lilly, what can this institute mean for Eli Lilly and Company?
Sure, and I would, thanks Gerry, I would look at this from 2 different points. Perspectives for Lilly. One is the sort of narrower view that Lilly will have as a research-driven pharmaceutical manufacturer. The second is the broader role that we play in the state. On the broader role first, what I would say is there are three things that we found have really made a difference in the creation of the Institute. One is engagement. I think that the engagement of leadership from across the life sciences companies in the state, across a wide spectrum of companies, has made a difference in the creation and the funding as well as thought leadership on this. The second is validation. It's one thing for one company like Eli Lilly and Company to say that we think something is an important idea. We like to think that that validates an idea at least somewhat, but not nearly as much as if Roche Diagnostics also gets behind this, and Dow AgroSciences also gets behind this, and IU Health, and Indiana University, and Purdue University, and of course the state. So I think that the role of corporate leadership here has been critical on the validation side as well. And then finally, collaboration. And this also leads specifically to the specific kinds of benefits that Lilly can get out of this. Beyond engagement and validation, collaboration is really built into the very fabric of this. It's actually built into the business model. We actually created a new business model around this, and collaboration with industry partners is a core element of that. What does it mean specifically for Lilly? Well, we are engaged in research in a broad variety of areas of human health as well as animal health. On the human health side, our research, for example, into cardiovascular disease in areas like atherosclerosis, as well as diabetes and glucose-lowering agents and other agents to help deal with the epidemic of diabetes today in society, are integrally involved in the kind of research that the Research Institute is going to be doing. And for us, that means the ability to work with a new group of scientists right in our backyard. People coming up with new biology, new targets for us to potentially find drug candidates against. And that lends directly to the collaborative nature of innovation in our company.
Okay. Ry Wagner, if you could chime in on the view from Dow AgroSciences, and also, maybe quickly, but then also, Dow and Lilly are in research partnerships all over the globe. In your view, and you travel all over the world, how do you view this institute and what it can be, how it can be different and advantageous to the state of Indiana?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I think Darren to follow Darren on a lot of the points he raised are really critical ones from Dow AgroSciences' perspective as well. We do, all of the companies represented in the formation of the Institute, work globally. We have partnerships around the world. And this really provides an opportunity to bring some of the innovation that's happening in other parts of the world here closer to home. Makes it more effective for us to develop those opportunities in a more rapid pace. The other piece of this is to foster that collaboration between Dow AgroSciences and our other life sciences partners in the state. There's been a convergence over the last decade, certainly, and in the last couple of years as well, in the technologies that we use, the biotechnologies that we use, regardless of whether it's agriculture or human health or life sciences. So I heard in the earlier panel a discussion a little bit around personalized medicine. We have personalized agriculture evolving right now. How do you handle large data sets? How do you make sense of that? We're working in very similar tools that this institute will in fact foster, not only between the corporations, but tie us in more closely with the public institutions as well, here in the backyard of Indiana. So we've really taken a first mover approach to this, and I think that will benefit us privately as well as publicly in the coming years.
How about the state's academic institutions? And Bill, I'll start with you. What does Indiana University see as the value in really engaging in this institute? What's it really going to mean from a bottom line standpoint to IU?
Well, Gerry, I think fundamentally this effort is important to Indiana University because it's important to the state of Indiana. And I think this audience, perhaps more so than many others, understands the significance of the life sciences industry to the economic future of the state of Indiana. So we have to be involved. We have to be heavily engaged. And I think we have some unique resources that we can bring to bear, whether it's the School of Medicine, whether it's resources at the College of Arts and Sciences in Bloomington, whether it's right here at IUPUI in terms of the School of Science or Engineering and Technology. all those resources need to be deployed in a way that's going to be supportive of the research effort that really undergirds what the Institute is all about. And I think it also allows us an opportunity to work differently with industry partners. I mean, we have a unique assemblage of internationally recognized industry leaders here. And it's an opportunity for Indiana University faculty and researchers to work in a way that perhaps we haven't worked with them before to really advance a common good here, and that is to further distinguish the life sciences industry in Indiana in a way that allows us to be competitive on a global basis. Mm-hmm. So I think for those reasons and others, it's important to Indiana University, both near-term and long-term, to be good partners, collaborators, and to work in innovative ways with research expertise that'll be assembled here in Indiana.
So possible new collaborations or entryways with the private sector.
Yeah,
possibly.
absolutely.
Marietta, how about Purdue? And could this mean new opportunities, additional opportunities for grad students and those types of things at the academic level?
Absolutely, Gerry, and thank you very much. I certainly echo what Bill says. So at Purdue, we're very enthusiastic about this. I think the first thing is that the opportunity to expand the science and research in Indiana is very important to us, as it is to all of the universities. This is something we really look forward to increasing Indiana as a science and research hub. Our faculty, as IU and Notre Dame and all of our partners, thrive in a research-intensive environment, and I think this will just enhance that environment tremendously. I think it has new and in many ways unique opportunities for our students. The applied nature and emphasis of the Institute, I think, is something that's a little bit different and will give our students a really hold on making a difference and being in an environment that can teach them how to make a difference in society. So we are enthusiastically on board.
Yeah. This is a very expensive undertaking. Brian, the state has, the legislature has committed funds to this and did so early on. What was that process like, or the discussion like at the State House level? And I guess another question would be, in your view, the leadership obviously buys into this, but do you think the legislature in general understands and appreciates and values this project, but the life sciences overall?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about how it unfolded, and then remind me on that last question about whether the average legislator gets it or not. The proposal to create the Life Sciences Institute connected a lot of dots for issues that legislators, particularly those of us who are committed to technology, ex-Purdue engineer, I just informed the Purdue representative, don't check my transcript, but Purdue engineer, IU lawyer, always struggled, product of Sputnik, as many of you in this room are, and were shoved into the science classes in grade school and high school because we were going to solve the problems that our nation faced. So I've always had a premonition that an effort like this would be key for especially the STEM industries, but so much more in the state. And we've done so many things around the edges, whether it's increasing and making permanent the research and development tax credit, the initial iteration of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which was my bill, which had the universities at the table also, too many people, larger panel than this. But we saw time and again that we needed somehow to unite our technology efforts, and a fine point was placed on this as with all the changes we have made in our environment here for job creation, on the top of everyone's Midwest list, whether it's Polina or site selection or CEO, whatever, Tax Foundation, #1 in the Midwest, number 5, 6, 7 maybe in the nation in job creation environment. And yet still dragging the nation in unemployment, but importantly, in the percentage of the national average that our individual workers make. So this is something we've been struggling with for a while and trying to find solutions. The Life Sciences Institute, I don't have the name exactly right, but I see Peggy Welch sitting out here, put a finer point on this issue over the last year as they began to repackage the life sciences industry as our leading industry, employment industry in the state. And when you add up everyone's jobs and you have 55,000 employees at an average salary approaching $90,000 per year, you start thinking, well, maybe advanced manufacturing alone isn't the only place to look. As the final point was the Battelle study, which was presented to me by a friend of my immediate left, perhaps before the publication date. I was under some unspoken confidentiality, which I read front to back and made clear that not only do we have the issue of the skills gap, which we know and are addressing, but we have an opportunity gap as well, as our high-performing graduates don't necessarily choose, but feel forced to locate out of state to get a rewarding career. So these items all came together, and when the concept of the Institute was first brought to myself and some others from representatives of Lilly and Cook and Roche and Biosciences and others, I immediately recognized it as a positive, and many other leaders did as well.
Very, very quickly, Brian, your view on the legislature in general and support for the life sciences, because obviously that's going to be very critical to this project in particular going forward.
Yeah, I would have to say that this was in a $28 billion budget. Not every legislator knows exactly what's in there. Every once in a while, the boss of one chamber or another can say, just put that in there. And $25 million was in. The leaders understood it, were aware of its advantages and the tremendous leverage that it creates here in our state. We'll be sure the rest of the legislature understands it as well. And I'm not just speaking for the House, but the Senate leadership. And I really believe both parties, the leadership understands that this is a critical initiative and has such potential for our state's future.
And Ryan, Governor Pence was on board with this early on, right? What does he see in this project in particular? Is it economic development, jobs? Is that a piece of his interest in this being a success?
Yeah, it is all those things. He's incredibly enthused and fired up about the Institute. And I think that stems from two primary interests that he was wrestling with even before being elected, as he likes to say, while he was going around the state applying for his current job. He was wrestling with sort of two things. One was this issue of having tremendous research capacity in a relatively geographically proximate way. I mean, we're very blessed and fortunate here in Indiana when you just look at the research output and capacity that we have in relatively close proximity, and a desire to see commercialization in that space work better and in a more streamlined way with industry. And so a question arose very early on, could we not look at various applied research institutes as models for helping that happen in various sectors of our economy? So that was one thing. And then secondly, and this is keying off of what the speaker was just saying, he was particularly interested in how we go about accelerating growth in the dynamic sectors of our economy. So where we have a lot of high wage, high demand job potential, what might we do to be able to invest in those sectors in a way that's powerful? Because we realize from the research we have available to us that when you have growth in these professional sectors, you see growth in other areas as well, services sectors and other related sectors of the economy. And so those were a couple of questions that he was wrestling with. And so when we met first with David Johnson and then with most of the people seated up here before you today, we realized that the timing was just right in the life sciences sector. There was an incredible amount of interest in doing this. And I think what gave the governor a lot of encouragement was just the industry-led nature of that interest. And as we began to look at what we were conceiving together here compared to other life sciences institutes around the country, we saw a really unique opportunity just because of the diversity of our sector and because of the interest represented up here at this table in making it happen. So his interest from the very beginning has been the overall contribution that this is going to make to Indiana's economy, the quality of jobs that we know, like the speaker just mentioned, that we desperately need in the state.
Yep. Dan, you represent the provider and patient side of things. Obviously, enormous change continues in the world of healthcare. What impact does this have an impact, this institute, when it comes to healthcare delivery? I mean, is there an impact that will be felt here in Indiana?
The quick answer is yes. Within walking distance of this spot right now are 2,000 patients in a bed right now. There's 15,000 professional staff at this moment serving those folks. Many of those folks should not be in a hospital in a bed. Many of them have chronic disease. Many of them have disease caused by aging. The clinical trials on artificial insulin Lilly's clinical trials were done at Methodist Hospital in the early 1920s. It's now 90 years later, and diabetes is not cured. And what's happened in the meantime is an actuarial tsunami of folks who both through behaviors and other things that happen in life, we have a disease state that's out of control. So I feel a great sense of urgency, and I believe the IBRI will bring both the private sector energy of focus as well as the public sector policy focus in a way that it hasn't happened here before and probably hasn't happened any place in the country. I don't want to get too dramatic about it, but we're facing in this country a catastrophe where unless we deliver innovative care quicker and in a more affordable way, it will not be, everybody uses the word sustainable, but it literally will not be sustainable. We don't have enough resources to do it. So, my 93-year-old mother-in-law is arthritic. How does she use a PDA to communicate with her caregivers about her disease state? She cannot. So there have to be multiple ways to do that. So the conversation this morning about personalized medicine being unaffordable, because we can't do enough algorithms for enough people, I'm hoping the IBRI will be also a petri dish for innovation with respect to the delivery of health care as well as the innovation of health care. And Indiana ought to be the spot for that. So on behalf of the patients and staff, we're grateful for the leadership that's been exhibited by the governor and Dr. Licklider and Brian and Senator Long and Luke Kinley and Tim and everybody else, because this really matters. In 1922, diabetes was rare. It ain't rare anymore. So we need innovation that cures it and manages the disease, and diabetes is just a metaphor for the host of diseases that simply didn't exist, that all of us in our lives are now going to bump into. And what do we want? We want innovation. So Brian made a crack about Sputnik and how that motivated us. I think this ought to fall in the same category, Brian. And the best example I can think of, and ought to give us all a feeling that we can do this, the President of the United States, President Roosevelt, decades ago said, we will eradicate polio. And we did. It happened. There is no reason to believe that modern science, coupled together with social media, we laugh about it, but the truth of the matter is the personalized part of medicine may be the delivery part of the information, not so much the cures themselves, but putting those all together in some of the models alluded to this morning will be helpful. One last thought. What we really need on behalf of patients and providers is elegant simplicity. Everybody get that? That what we've created is a monstrously complex environment in which we treat people of all ages, all skills, all levels of education, all disease states, and we need to, at the end of the day, the IBRI needs to help us figure out ways to deliver care that works to folks not only in Indiana, but the beauty of it is Indiana can deliver this to the world. So the employment is great, the innovation is great, the investment is great. That's all wonderful, but it has a purpose. And the purpose is to improve lives of people here and around the world. So I'm grateful for the leadership that's been exhibited that's got us to this point.
Very good. Adam, you bring a unique skill set here as an urban planner. In your view, what can this institute mean? I'm pretty sure a location has not been selected, but I think there's a feeling that perhaps it will be located here in Indianapolis. What can that mean to a city, to an area, to an ability to attract and retain talent, which is such a huge issue for the state?
Well, I think it gets to kind of two of my past lives, if you will. I'm certainly now an advocate for Indianapolis in my role as the director of the Department of Metropolitan Development, but in a previous life, I certainly spent extensive time dealing with medical center master planning, and it gets back down to this kind of question of how do you create this ecosystem, this really strong place for success, and that goes beyond kind of the glass tower in which the researcher does his work, or how do you create that kind of environment? And I kind of wrote down, it really comes down to 4 major points. Kind of creating this place where there's these interactions, and I kind of joke that the city has to find a way to make the best water cooler here around this area, and the IBRI becomes that water cooler. How do you gather and have those interactions that aren't the normal everyday interaction that leads to the next idea that comes out? I think second is really how do we figure out how to move people between institutions. Dan mentioned that there's about 15,000 professionals. I had the pleasure of living for a year at the Texas Medical Center. There's 70,000 professionals at the Texas Medical Center every day. And how do we move them? So how do they walk? How do they bike? How do they take a car? Hopefully, how do they take transit? How do they start to move around that ecosystem? How do we inspire them? I encourage all of you, in the next 2 months, you've got to get to the new Wishard Eskenazi Hospital when it opens up. It is an inspirational environment, I think, for those who are trying to come up with answers to these difficult problems. And then lastly, I think from an urban planner's perspective, you can't forget the very small details. And I'll use a little example. I happen to be doing the master plan for Harvard Sciences District, and the top thing we asked the faculty at Harvard said, what can we not get rid of when we think about the future of your district? And I said, is it, do you need more wet lab space or dry lab space? Or what do you can't get rid of the volleyball court. What do you mean we can't? What are you talking about? Well, the tattered volleyball court is where our researchers come out of the dark and enjoy a life that's not test tubes and hard work and 24-hour-a-day research. So I say that as an analogy that when we create this ecosystem, we can't just create the next big glass tower or glass building. We truly have to create a city. These people live here, and we want them to live not only in the area, but also in our city.
Walt, I purposely saved you for the end of this first kind of section of our discussion because you've seen the creation, the formation of other research institutes. Talk about, if you will, or compare the genesis of those institutes with what's being done here. And really from a bottom line standpoint, why is this a good idea for Indiana in particular to pursue?
So there's been at least a half dozen major bio-related research institutes created in the last decade. Places like Broad in Boston, Danforth in St. Louis, Stowers in Kansas City, TGen in Phoenix, Sanford Burnham in San Diego, and several others there. But those all represent the kinds of institutes that have done well in leveraging outside dollars and increasingly moving their ideas into commercial products. But what they all generally were developed in one of 2 ways. One is a philanthropic group or organization or individual was the initial funder of them, or in the case of Florida, the state government at a price tag of $1.7 billion, I might add. 25 million is a bargain in Indiana. Those institutes, in most cases, did not have the critical mass of companies that Indiana has. The 55,000 employees now, diversified, as Rye and others already have talked about, really represent an opportunity to build an industry partnership with academia, with medical centers, with others. And this is the first case that I can recall in many a decade where you actually have the industry saying, we want to build the research engine. We want to come forward and put dollars in areas in which we need further expertise and knowledge. Generally, companies get their expertise anywhere in the country. Our federal research apparatus funds PIs anywhere and everywhere. It's not related to where the industry is. So the industry has to go find the experts. This institute in certain areas actually creates a mass of that expertise right here that then those companies in turn can do more research here, but increasingly it provides collaboration for the universities here and the teaching hospitals and medical centers to also collaborate with them. So it's a leverage situation that creates another major research anchor in addition to what you already have here to build upon for the future. And because it's industry-led, it's going to address industry problems. One of the challenges historically is that researchers operate in the linear model. We'll do our work. When we're done, we'll tell you what it came up with, but don't tell us what to look at. Well, it turns out actually what they could have looked at would have probably been okay, but they didn't talk to each other. So what this offers is an environment for communication from the start, from the beginning, and doing the problem solving to doing the research and collaborating together. Creates jobs, it creates more dollars in the state, it creates the supplier industries, and one of the things Indiana needs to be careful about is that all industries go through cycles, and what you have to do is stay ahead of the innovation engine. And so if you don't have the new products, new ideas, new techniques nearby in your midst, pretty soon somebody else in the world may get ahead of you.
Good. Again, I'll remind our audience to feel free to tweet any questions you may have of this panel. Darren, I'll start with you, and anyone, lots of folks here can comment on this, so jump in after Darren's remarks. But in terms of talent and attracting and keeping top talent, and Indiana is a huge issue for lots of folks in the state of Indiana. How does this institute help Lilly and other companies really attract people here? You know, they always talk about no mountains, no oceans, and all those types of things, and the challenges that Indiana has. I think we continue to defy those odds in many respects, but the quote-unquote brain drain remains an issue in the state. How does this change things for Lilly?
Well, I think to me, it all begins and ends with really great science. I think the talent we're most concerned with attracting and keeping are the best scientists, the best engineers to create the institute and actually to help all of our respective institutions, whether it's Indiana University or Purdue University, Dow AgroSciences, or Lilly. One of the things we've noted in the past is we've actually been able to attract and retain great scientists at each of those places, right? So that's for Hoosiers do have a wonderful sense of humility, and we probably need to leave that at the door sometimes, and this may be one of those times. There's a lot of great, truly world-class talent here today working in the state, and we do think that great scientists, great engineers are attracted by other great scientists and engineers, and they're attracted by the opportunity to work on really great problems. And that actually gets to one of the points actually that Rye raised earlier, and that is the convergence of science actually is what's creating a lot of the opportunity here. This is a point actually that Rye made very, very early on in the process as we were talking about what could we do, what could the next big idea be. Nature tends to conserve biology if it works. And it turns out then that there's conserved biology in plants, there's conserved biology in human beings. So what if a scientist at Dow AgroSciences is looking at exactly the same target that a scientist at Lilly is working on? Well, how do you know that? Well, one of the ways you might know that actually is with the Institute. The Institute can actually be the place where that science convenes. By making that kind of science available, that's the single best way I think that we can attract great scientists and great engineers.
Good. Who else wants to weigh in on that?
Just a couple of comments here. Having once been a lab scientist who occasionally came out of the dark, we have a tremendous opportunity. The scientists, the business connection that we have here really does afford us that opportunity. If we can create that quality of life environment that Adam discussed, then there's not a problem, because these people are going to be extremely passionate about the work they're doing. They're going to see the impact, as we heard earlier, for the patients and the citizens of Indiana, and that will be a huge motivation. There are very few opportunities, quite frankly, where you could have this sort of momentum being built and supported that would drive and attract people like we're talking about here. So this in its own right will be a magnet that will help create, but as well hold individuals here.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I consider the Institute kind of the gauntlet for our city. It's saying if we're going to attract talent, the city better attract talent with its quality of life, and it kind of makes us step up our game. So you talk about quality of life issues, it kind of talks about the spectrum, and these folks aren't coming from, a couple of states away. They're coming internationally, and we're competing. So either we're going to compete for them and give them the product of the city or the state, or we're not, because that's going to be a big part of it. People are moving to the city they want to live in before they have the job even. And that's what we've got to be looking towards at our inner city.
Can I add
Yep.
an additional
Then we'll
thought
get to
about
Walt.
this?
Yep.
I mentioned the Polina study and the opportunity gap, and this is really going to counter what Adam just said, and I know that's the general consensus right now. But the Battelle study, which was funded by CICP and distributed by CICP, Biosciences, others, they interviewed some 2,500, I mean, I have the number exactly right, young people who had left Indiana and were elsewhere, and they'd tracked them down through one means or another. And it wasn't just environment, and it wasn't just mountains and oceans that caused them to leave. And this is with a dad that has a 25-year-old daughter on a mountainside in Colorado right now, okay, for 3.5 years. It was really about finding a job that was rewarding, challenging, and giving that young person and their family the ability to have an exciting career, a challenging career, and one that would be meaningful financially as well. And so I really believe that the Institute has is part of the solution for that opportunity gap where we have our top graduates who say, oh yeah, this has been great, mom and dad did great here, but golly, I can't find the right job. And you know, California sounds pretty cool, or Colorado, or wherever. So I really do believe that it has a strong potential to address just this issue.
Yeah, we have a question to the right, but Walt, I know you wanted to jump in
just
first.
to add to that point, one of the things the Institute can do is actually help retain young people in Indiana, because it'll create internships, practicums. Most of the folks that do the research are postdocs, graduate students, undergraduates, and if they in fact get the opportunities here at Indiana, that can lead to employment in the industries here, whether it's startup or existing or expanding. And part of building your base in Indiana is really retaining your young talent and hoping they stay here and have job opportunities here, and this is going to help do that.
Good. We do have a question.
Hi, sorry, I don't know how to tweet my question. To point out a sort of an overlay on the discussion you've just had is this amazing and wonderful panel that you have up here that's gigantic is 90% men. And I know when you talk about all the things that attract people and keep people, and we're needing to have an ever-increasing diverse group of folks that want to come here and do their research here. And we know the women a lot are the healthcare decision makers, and you're thinking about how you want to interface with that population. What can this institute do to help with that and to bring along others and diversify that some more?
Gotcha. Who wants to take that one? Yeah, Dan.
I meant to allude to that issue in my comments about my mother-in-law. By that I mean, I'm hoping the Institute can recognize that who matters here is the patient, and the patient has to be reflected in the work that's done and the people who do that work. So one thing I've discovered, being what I am, is that there's a Mars-Venus issue. That the people who are the sickest in our society are men who don't fill their prescriptions, who don't take the drugs to their conclusion, with one exception: men that have a strong woman in their lives, and they are healthier. So that the diversity that you're alluding to is back to my comments about patient focus. There's another reason to be diverse, and that's the reason right there. And if we don't recognize that, then we are fundamentally flawed.
Yep. Ryan?
I would just say I think this relates very much to the discussion that we were just having up here. One thing that we've taken note of is how other dynamically growing parts of this country grow and why they grow and where you see talent agglomerations. And it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, right? You need highly trained, talented professionals in a place in order to attract highly trained professionals into a place. And so you need sectors that you can sort of bet on in that regard. And then to use Adam's expression of the water cooler, that's sort of what we regard this institute as being. When you look in a parallel way at the software technology space, and we all have friends maybe in Austin, Texas, I like to joke with my friends in Austin that Austin wasn't always weird like they say it was. It used to just be a university and a government town. But once the Dell phenomenon happened, this flywheel sort of kicked into place, and you have this agglomeration of talent in this area. And talented people like to be around other talented people. They like to have opportunities, not just with one company, but across companies where their skills can be used. And I think all of us understand that the Institute helps play that role here. And I think by attracting the kind of world-class talent that we're envisioning, I think this problem will essentially take care of itself, is my view. Just as a final note, when I recently had a chance to visit the Broad Institute, and if you walk around, I don't know who else has been here, it was my first time. When you walk around the halls of that place, it's an incredibly vibrant, dynamic environment. It's not just a bunch of petri dishes and laboratories. It feels a lot like a startup environment. It's an incredibly diverse workforce in every definition of that term. And I think it creates a great picture of what we're all envisioning here.
Very good. Marietta, you had a comment.
I'd just like to say that I think as far as the life sciences goes, at Purdue, and I think I can speak for all the universities, half of our graduate class are female. Now, I can't say that for engineering. We're working hard on that. But so I think in the life sciences arena, you're going to see more and more women coming up to leadership positions. And I would certainly just echo what's said before. If you look at Purdue, we have an incredibly diverse graduate student body. And so I think science by its very nature is diversifying because there's many talents in many different areas. And so I think there's hope. I think there's a lot of hope in the life sciences.
One more comment, David?
Just real quickly, in our initial work in beginning to look at the talent that's out there and asking some of the companies and some of the professional advisors we have to begin to identify a prototype of the kind of people we're looking at, a great number of them are women. This is a whole new day. This is a sector of rising opportunity and rising talent, and frankly, we are looking to bring the next generation of opportunity here. So I think the Institute will look considerably more diverse from a gender standpoint than any other leadership platform we've assembled here in the past.
And also, David, I think the Institute has the flexibility for work-life kind of issues to deal with all of that. I think that's one of the I think, biggest opportunities with the Institute is its flexibility.
Good. Answer your question? Very good. Thank you for that question. You have a question?
I do.
Okay, good. I can't see with the lights there. Go right ahead.
Question regarding the issue of commercialization. We've heard the argument that in addition to the environment, a great place to live, for young investigators specifically, the commercialization of their ideas is an important part in their career development. Let me give you a specific example of a deal that was presented to me recently by a research group who had developed their own company, and they were basically using a rat model, which they had worked on, to project to the human experiment or the human outcome. Now, this implies, or the implication and the reality is that they're seeking venture capital to do additional lab work way before actual commercialization takes place. The question I have for you is, as an institute, what role does the institute play in looking at this problem? Because basically private funds are being sought to replace public funds that used to be available that are no longer available. And this, of course, creates a whole new problem for researchers who are now much earlier in the product development cycle seeking venture funds.
Darren, you want to take that one?
I think that's an essential question that actually got right to the very core of the business side of what we talked about when we talked early on about what the Institute could be and should be. Part of the reason for the industry leadership here is we do believe that the industry participation here is essential to help determine what actually can be commercialized, and how it can be industrialized. Two different questions, actually. What we don't want to do is have that participation crimp the creativity or the style, quite frankly, of of sort of more uninhibited research that gets done in the universities, more basic research that really is essential for progress. On the other hand, it is just as essential if someone wants to take that research into commercialization to know what actually sells and what it takes to do that. And having the industry participants right at the table and having collaboration built into the DNA, the very fabric of this, is essential. And I think that is actually one of the key ways in which this institute is actually quite different. The other thing that I would say is we did recognize early on that there is an issue with stewardship here. And that is to say an awful lot of the public fisc does go into scientific research and engineering research. And I'll be the first to say, by the way, not enough. But I would also say that whatever is spent there actually imposes on every one of us an obligation to use it as responsibly as we can. And that means that where there are opportunities to use resources more parsimoniously, to identify paths to applications that are more likely to succeed or could do so with less money, I think it's incumbent on all of us to actually take advantage of that, which is why actually we need this greater collaboration.
Good. Question, sir? Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Matt Morris with Franklin College, and I'm curious, how does Franklin College, where we have a strong science curriculum, where 60% of the science majors are women, we have a dramatically increasing number of science majors, how do we become more of a player in these discussions and in these collaborations? Most of our graduates stay in Indiana if the continued brain drain is a concern. So how do we become more of a collaborator and more of a driver in these kinds of discussions and in propelling the life sciences economy? Thank you.
Good question. Who wants to take that one? Yeah, right.
A bit here. So I think it's a really good point, and while we've made, I think, phenomenal progress in the past year since John Lechlater's proposal on a bold new initiative, we are now just at the point where we're beginning to reach other parts and other sectors within the state, such as you brought up here. And so as we go forward, we'll look for those opportunities that make sense in the right timing as the Institute goes forward, and we certainly welcome you bringing that to us in advance of that timing. And part of the foundation of the Institute is very much the research that we've conveyed, we're excited in, the economic impact, the benefit for the citizens of Indiana. And as you come to that last point, the benefit for the citizens of Indiana, we recognize that education and other types of activities coming from the Institute is going to be a benefit that we will help provide. And so that will come in a variety of forms at different levels, even beyond the institutes that we have here and the universities that we have represented here today. So we're out of the gate, we're running as fast as we can, and that's a very good point and something we're very aware of, and we want to begin that engagement here quite soon.
Very good. We have another question. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate you're talking about jobs and it's what's going to come from the Institute, but while we're waiting on that, if I could address Mr. Speaker and also Dr. Streeter, thank you. Kristen Jones and I thank you for amending your legislation regarding the career councils to give life sciences a seat at the table to make sure those jobs are going to be addressed. Could you give us your insight into that and maybe the status of that, and then kind of getting down to more where you got boots on the ground with the work councils that the governor has been working on, to give us a status of that, and how would that eventually play into what the Institute is doing?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address a little bit of that, Peggy. Great to see you. I indicated in my very brief remarks that we really see two challenges. Policymakers at the state level see two challenges. One's a skills gap, and that's addressing the fact that we have 11,000, according to the Brookings Institute, 11,000 open technical positions here in central Indiana with no one to accept them because plenty of unemployed, but they don't have the skills. So in order to address that, the legislature this year really did two items. One was Governor Pence's proposal, one was mine, and we married them. First of all, one of the big problems with the skills gap, aligning curriculum, available jobs, and job opportunities, is that there are 13 or 14 silos of information at the state level on this issue that have some different aspect of it, whether it's higher ed or K-12 or Department of Workforce Development or even Family Social Services Agency that has a welfare to work program. So we brought all those folks to the table with the governor as chair, vice chair, lieutenant governor, and representatives, as you know, of industry and commerce, labor, life sciences, particularly logistics, and said, okay, fix this. Well, it wasn't quite that easy, but we did cause them by statute to create a strategic plan. We've got strategic plans for all kinds of things. Every one of your business has some strategic plan. I have a strategic plan for my law firm. But the state doesn't have a strategic plan on addressing the skills gap. So they were charged with two things. One, inventorying all the opportunities, training opportunities that we have in the state. No, they're not even on one list anywhere. And second, creating a strategic plan to address this skills gap. Now, because of my enthusiasm over the opportunity gap, we threw that charge in as well. And it's really a job of the economic development, Indiana Economic Development Corporation, Ryan's team, a lot of different folks. But that was what the state level was. And then there was a second piece, which was the regional level, and I'll let Ryan explain that one.
Yep.
Yeah, those are great remarks. I mean, I'm really excited about what the Career Council is doing just because of what it's doing is so important. We have this gap, but we haven't had a plan to address it, and so now we're getting about that business, which is great. I think at the regional level, it's a great question. At the regional level, the main idea here is that we have a very industry-driven body of activity there too. You notice a recurring theme here. But at the regional level, the works councils are to be driven primarily by industry representatives that actually have specific certification and related types of requirements that they want to see offered in that region, starting within high school. And it's important, particularly in sectors like this, where not everybody's wearing a white lab coat, but in the medical device industry, for instance, over half the jobs don't require a college degree, and you can begin those certifications at an early age. So our not only expectation, but what's actually happening is that life sciences companies here in Indiana are actually stepping up and joining those works councils. So it's an incredibly important part of it. And if anyone here has an interest in being a part of that and you're not, then you can certainly contact me after this and we can make sure that you're plugged in the region that you're concerned about.
Good. David.
If I could make just one other observation on this. What we're hearing up here in the discussion of the Institute and the basis for it, the data that forms the basis for it, what we know about the life sciences sector in Indiana, the data that Brian used, really all the panelists have used in describing the number of jobs, what people make in this sector, where the companies are. If we didn't have that data, the idea of the Institute would never have come about because our industry said, hey, we are in the top 5 of the United States. What are we doing about that? And that it posed the question by having that data for the very first time. And when I hear Peggy's question on the broader issue of what are we doing not only in the life sciences sector, but in other sectors, and other technology-driven sectors, other high-end wage-producing sectors in the state, we need the same kind of approach to data there as well. And I hope that that's going to be a part of the state efforts. It needs to be a part of the private sector efforts as well, to begin to generate the same kind of information on the other promising sectors of opportunity that we have for life sciences that have led to a development like this institute.
Very good. Have another question.
Yes, was curious from the perspective of this is an awesome beginning of a collaboration, and in that spirit, where you've got industry, academia, and maybe even scientists coming from overseas that joins this great group. Technologies are going to be hopefully generated. Intellectual property is going to be created, and it's just what's the model that licenses that technology and keeps it a collaboration instead of a competition?
It's a great question, and I appreciate that very much. It was actually a challenge that was posed to us quite early on in the discussion, both in the formative stages of the concept of the Institute, and then very quickly as we started to work as an industry body with our colleagues at the universities. And it was a challenge probably greater than people imagined we could overcome easily, and we had a number of very in-depth conversations around that, and we now have concluded a framework for handling intellectual property for the Institute, which has been agreed upon by the major industries that are behind us, as well as the major universities that we've worked with. And that is really a landmark in moving forward in how that will be handled to the benefit of the Institute. The Institute will be a not-for-profit, so there are certain considerations we had to make. To the benefit of industry sponsors, to the benefit of students who are working on projects. So we're actually quite happy that we have resolved that. It's not saying everything has to be done this way, but it's a framework that allows us to move forward very quickly in terms of putting projects in place, et cetera. So.
Very good. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to try to get 2 questions in. One is, and Walt touched on this, one of the challenges, and I'll kind of paraphrase here, but for the Institute will be keeping ahead of that next great thing and really pushing forward when it comes to innovation. What are, and I don't direct this to anyone in particular, but what are the biggest challenges? We've talked a lot about the great things that can happen with the Institute, but going forward, what are the 1 or 2 things that you're looking at right now? You're saying, boy, we really need to address this. This is something we need to focus on and pay attention to. Who wants to step up?
I'll start, and then
Okay,
I'll try
good.
and do this in 30 seconds or less. We have made absolutely tremendous progress, and it's come through a spirit of collaboration amongst those that have been involved, both in the public and private sector, the state, from both the House and Senate and the governor's office. We're now at the stage of implementation, and some of the first things that we need to do are define location. We need to define and identify a CEO and bring them to Indiana. We need to get some of the critical more senior level positions in place that will allow us to really enable the intellectual property development and do so in a manner in which we keep that collaboration spirit alive and well. And we're sort of at that point in the process where now we're getting down to a lot of details which can sometimes derail that higher level of collaboration. So I think we just need to continue to build upon that spirit that we've started with, and all these other pieces will fall into place. There needs to be a little bit of patience. This has moved faster than probably anybody realized, and so some of the next steps will seem perhaps slow relative to what we've done in the last 6 or 9 months, but we're well on our way.
Good. Marietta?
Yeah, I think being in the business of trying to recruit high-level scientific talent to the university, I think there's a challenge there. But I'm optimistic because this is such a unique framework. And I think there are many people out here across the United States and even, as you mentioned, internationally, who will be intrigued by this, who will be intellectually stimulated by this. And so I think that it will be a challenge, in my opinion, to attract the talent that we envision, and that'll really put Indiana in the forefront as a research and scientific hub. But again, I'm optimistic because so many, maybe it's coming a little bit from Purdue where we're kind of engineering oriented, so we're very kind of applied, and we've worked with industry for a long time in that setting, that there's a lot of folks out there who think of this as the future of science and the future of contributing technology to the advancement. So it's a challenge, but I think we have an advantage.
Yeah, Bill?
Gerry, just to follow up on that, I think the recruitment is a challenge in some respects, but the opportunity to attract world-class talent to Indiana, to not only affiliate with internationally recognized industry leaders in the life and biosciences, but also with internationally recognized research universities. Our colleagues at Purdue, at Indiana University, up at Notre Dame. I think that's a real draw, to be able to work with faculty in related disciplines who are also recognized internationally. And I think to Matt Morris's question too, this enterprise is going to require the support from all of Indiana's colleges and universities. Higher ed institutions across the state are going to need to step up and play a role, whether it's in terms of supplying talent or contributing in the research effort or in related disciplines. There's a role here for everyone. This is, I think, going to require the best of Indiana to move things forward. and everyone contributing in meaningful ways.
Very good. We have about a minute left. David, I'll send it to you to kind of put a bow on this, if you will, in terms of next steps and timelines and those types of things, to the extent that you can share that.
You bet. Well, we've just identified what are the great opportunities, but also the great challenges moving forward. They are first of all going out and finding and recruiting the right and best CEO to come here to do that, and that process is about to begin. It will also be to really focus on where the Institute goes. We've talked about there might be a central Indiana focus to it, which certainly makes sense given the stakeholders here. But there's also probably likely to be sort of a hub and spoke or satellite component to this, where there might be some facilities in other parts of the state to take advantage of other opportunities we have in Indiana. That certainly seems to be driven particularly by our clinical opportunities, both north and south. The university and industry issues that we are seeking to work through have never been resolved by anybody before. So we're trying to do really big things internally as a collaborative group, all of which is going very well, but all of which will require continued work. And finally, there's funding. The state of Indiana really stepped up in an unprecedented way and committed $25 million to the idea of an industry-led research institute. Industry has responded by working to gather the next $25 million for the IBRI, which we are now in the state in the process of finalizing. I'm not going to make any news here this morning by telling you by whom and in what amounts, but we are about there. In fact, I think we are there at the $50 million mark for the Institute, and that is a great beginning that enables us to take the next steps. There is more fundraising we will all need to be doing over the time ahead. This is an expensive proposition to do, and the private sector will need to step up to the plate. There are other ways that I'm certain we'll ask our public sector friends to step up to the plate to help us in moving the Institute ahead. So this is a long-term partnership we're digging in on. But it's been 6 months, actually less than 6 months, Brian, since the General Assembly adjourned, and we're already at that $50 million mark on the fundraising side. So I feel very, very good about the momentum and trajectory we've got going.
Very good. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules. And very importantly, thanks for all you do for the state of Indiana, because it is incredibly important. I think you've laid out the case for this institute this morning. So thank you very much. Please join me in giving a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you.